Welcome to Prophet Central. We are in chapters 38 and 39 this week, and we are continuing on from the narrative that we've been going through with King Hezekiah, king of Judah. We've talked about how Hezekiah has received many blessings of God and been preserved and spared in warfare and saved from destruction. To get a more full account of this story, you can go to 2 Kings chapter 20 and 2 Chronicles chapter 32. That adds a few more pieces of the puzzle of this story. But we get a good amount here in Isaiah. We'll go through the ups and the downs. So let's get into the word summary. Okay, in chapters 38 and 39 this week, we are going to read 860 words. And I have marked 36% negative and 17% neutral with some of the narrative that we'll be reading. And the large majority, 47%, is positive. So we get more positivity here. And we're reaching the end of King Hezekiah's life. So we see the blessings that God is pouring out. So starting in Isaiah chapter 38, we'll be reading verses 1 through 3. In those days was Hezekiah sick unto death. And Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amoz, came unto him and said unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Set thine house in order, for thou shalt die and not live. Then Hezekiah turned his face toward the wall and prayed unto the Lord, and said, Remember now, O Lord, I beseech thee, how I have walked before thee in truth and with a perfect heart, and have done that which is good in thy sight. And Hezekiah wept sore. All right, so we'll start off this commentary talking about how God is commanding us to set our house in order. And this is so that we can prepare to meet God, whether it's on our deathbed or it's any time in life, in order to be born again, to be able to see the kingdom of heaven. Because ultimately we want to dwell with God in the next life and in eternity. We want to be part of his family. And all of this begins with communication that happens through the vehicle of prayer, of communicating with God. So I would ask a question. Can we say in our hearts or profess to others that we have followed in God's way, as Hezekiah is saying in his prayer here? Can we say that we have followed in truth and with a pure heart, seeking to glorify God in everything that we have done? Can we honestly say that? Or have we faltered and have we stumbled? And are we guilty before God, seeking to hide ourselves under the rocks in the caves, as we've read before? Are we puffed up in the pride of our hearts and of our own righteousness, perhaps, only taking in and not giving? And I bring that up because if you read the other chapters that I mentioned that discuss this narrative here, you will see how Hezekiah was maybe taking more than he was giving out. He was willing to accept and receive more than he was willing to serve and to give. But let's go on to verses 4 through 8. Then came the word of the Lord to Isaiah, saying, Go and say to Hezekiah, Thus saith the Lord, the God of David thy father, I have heard thy prayer, I have seen thy tears. Behold, I will add unto thy days 15 years. And I will deliver thee in this city out of the hand of the king of Assyria. And I will defend this city. And this shall be a sign unto thee from the Lord, that the Lord will do this thing that he hath spoken. Behold, I will bring again the shadow of the degrees, which is gone down in the sundial of Ahaz, 10 degrees backward. So the sun returned 10 degrees, by which degrees it was gone down. So in this portion of Scripture, we get the blessing of God again being poured out. And God answers Hezekiah's prayer as he is mourning and weeping on his deathbed. And he is given life. He is given 15 more years. And relating that to the 10 commandments of lengthening thy days that comes from honoring thy father and thy mother. We see a literal blessing being poured out of Hezekiah's days being lengthened, at least in mortal life, okay? The Lord promises deliverance for those who rely upon him and seek unto him for salvation and no other replacement for him. There's no other means of life in this world. God is the giver of life. And if we believe, then signs are going to follow, and we can know for surety that God is real, that God is there to bless us, because these blessings can come from no other source. God is the source of all that is good. And I would mention the seriousness, the awesomeness of the order of the universe being altered for our sake, for our knowledge of God, for his blessing upon us. Because we literally saw you could say the sun going back, or the earth turning back, however you want to look at it. The shadow turned back 10 degrees on the sundial. And there are other significances to this I won't go into in this video, but this is a change of time, essentially, that you start to see calendars being changed after this 8th century, 7th century, and going, closer to the meridian of time, to 1st century BC, and then the flip to AD, when Christ comes, and the times have been changed. But let's keep going in verses 9 through 13. The writing of Hezekiah, king of Judah, when he had been sick and was recovered of his sickness. I said, in the cutting off of my days, I shall go to the gates of the grave. I am deprived of the residue of my years. I said, I shall not see the Lord, even the Lord in the land of the living. I shall behold man no more with the inhabitants of the world. Mine age is departed, and is removed from me as a shepherd's tent. I have cut off like a weaver my life. He will cut me off with pining sickness. From day even to night wilt thou make an end of me. I reckoned till morning, that as a lion, so will he break all my bones. From day even to night wilt thou make an end of me. I won't be saying too much commentary here, but this is where we get a bit of the negativity coming out. I mean, you got Hezekiah, again, deathly sick, ready to just break down and give it all. And he has no hope in life. We put ourselves into a situation similar to this. We can see how desperately we need to turn to God for his gift and to receive his blessing. And Hezekiah here is desiring more life or lengthened days. And mortality brings an inevitable halt to everyone, which is death, right? And that is sure to include sickness. It's sure to include pain and breaking of bones, he talks about here. God is a lion, as we've gone over in chapters 31 and 32. So let's keep going in the narrative. We'll read 14 through 17. Like a crane or a swallow, so did I chatter. I did mourn as a dove. Mine eyes fell with looking upward. O Lord, I am oppressed. Undertake for me. What shall I say? He hath both spoken unto me, and himself hath done it. I shall go softly all my years in the bitterness of my soul. O Lord, by these things men live, and in all these things is the life of my spirit. So wilt thou recover me and make me to live? Behold, for peace I had great bitterness. But thou hast in love to my soul delivered it from the pit of corruption, for thou hast cast all my sins behind thy back. Now again, putting ourselves in the place of Hezekiah, through the worst of mortality. Think about how we often complain and we fail to honor our Father in heaven. And we don't look to him for salvation. We look to perhaps doctors and medicine and the strength of the world, of the flesh, of mankind for salvation. Now, I'm not saying that is a bad thing. We should completely ignore it, but it is never our first resort. and it should always be taken in counsel with God. I also would ask, can we recognize quickly our fault when we do stumble? And do we turn to God with a repentant heart immediately? Are we quick or are we slow in that process, in that humbling? Do we recognize and remember all of the times that God has been present, giving us his word and blessing? Or do we forget? And do we leave that foundation, that testimony? In deep humility and poverty of spirit, we can find forgiveness. And we become enveloped in the love of God as we turn from satiation in the things of the world and the flesh, and we turn to this satiation in the treasures of heaven. And in losing our life, we find it in God. Right? Think about Matthew 10, verse 39, about he who seeketh his life loseth it. He who loseth his life findeth it in Christ. Now going on to verses 18 through 22. For the grave cannot praise thee, death cannot celebrate thee. They that go down into the pit cannot hope for thy truth. The living, he shall praise thee. As I do this day, the Father to the children shall make known thy truth. The Lord was ready to save me. Therefore we will sing my songs to the stringed instruments all the days of our life in the house of the Lord. For Isaiah had said, let them take a lump of figs, and lay it for a plaster upon the boil, and he shall recover. Hezekiah also had said, what is the sign that I shall go up to the house of the Lord? So we get the flip of the narrative, because we're kind of getting a glimpse back in time from Hezekiah's writings of when he was depressed and worried and dying, and then he receives God's blessing and his life is restored. But I want to highlight how Hezekiah is basically saying that everything that the world has to offer to him, to us, to anybody, is opposite of God and cannot bask in glory or in the goodness to overcome its fallen state, its imperfection and corruption. But it consumes all who fail to leave it behind. Everyone who holds fast to it, it eats them up, right? As I said before, wickedness cannibalizes itself. But we need to learn to let it go, humble ourselves, and let it be consumed in godliness. Now, I would also highlight here how those who find their life in God sing praises and they glorify his divinity and majesty. We see this throughout many scriptures where these songs of redeeming love are sung. And it's because it changes us. It shows us the reality of God. Because God can heal us through simple means. As I said, not looking to man in the complex formulas and medicines of the day or procedures, but through simple things like a fig. Hezekiah sought treatment from God, which was given through Isaiah, not through the doctors, not through medicine of their time, but through a simple fruit that God makes. And life can be found in the fruit of the kingdom of heaven, and salvation offered through the fruit of God being Jesus Christ, God in the flesh, the way, the truth, and the life, because he covers us and mollifies our sores. The whole body is sick, as we read in Isaiah chapter 1, and we need that good Samaritan. Now let's go to chapter 39, verses 1 through 4. At that time, Merodach Baladan, the son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent letters and a present to Hezekiah, for he had heard that he had been sick and was recovered. And Hezekiah was glad of them, and shewed them the house of his precious things, the silver and the gold, and the spices, and the precious ointment, and all the house of his armor, and all that was found in his treasures. There was nothing in his house, nor in all his dominion, that Hezekiah shewed them not. Then came Isaiah the prophet unto King Hezekiah, and said unto him, What said these men? And from whence came they unto thee? And Hezekiah said, They are come from a far country unto me, even from Babylon. Then said he, What have they seen in thine house? And Hezekiah answered, All that is in mine house have they seen. There is nothing among my treasures that I have not shewed them. Okay, so we get more of the story here. After Hezekiah is healed, he starts, telling the whole world, word gets out. We should be outwardly praising God so that the world can see the good works of God and can know of the reality of God and know the victories that his people have gained through his power. That is a good thing. The light is shining to the world here. But we shouldn't do it for the praise and treasures of the world. As Hezekiah is getting all these gifts, people are coming to him, praising him perhaps, in addition to his God. But we need to remain humble through it all. We should do it with the hope that others will come unto Christ, unto our Maker, our God, and gain the same victories, receive the same blessings. That is our hope and our faith. If we are not careful, the riches of the world will overtake our heart and lift us up in pride. As we have read, the daughters of Zion become haughty through these riches that they accumulate. So are we focused on the laying up of treasures of the world or the treasures of heaven? That's a constant question we need to be working through. Now verses 5 through 8. Then said Isaiah to Hezekiah, Hear the word of the Lord of hosts. Behold, the days come, that all that is in thine house and that which thy fathers have laid up in store until this day shall be carried to Babylon. Nothing shall be left, saith the Lord, and of thy sons that shall issue from thee, which thou shalt beget, shall they take away, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. Then said Hezekiah to Isaiah, Good is the word of the Lord, which thou hast spoken. He said, Moreover, for there shall be peace and truth in my days. So here we're getting insight into Hezekiah's heart, his true desire. And he's becoming corrupted again. After all these people are visiting him and giving him more and more and more, he's losing sight of God again. And I say that because this is 100 years or so before Babylon rises to power and conquers Judah and takes them all away captive. And Isaiah is challenging him. He's asking him, why, who is coming here? Who's showing you all this? And then he flips it on him. And if we set our hearts upon the treasures of the world, then we will eventually lose them to this self-consumption, this cannibalistic nature that the world has. And as Isaiah flips it on Hezekiah, he gives a strange response. I mean, he was sorrowful for his own life to be taken, yet when his sons, his posterity, are prophesied to be in captivity, he has no remorse. The world is going to overcome this kingdom that is set upon the treasures of the world, and it's going to affect generations to come. If we set our hearts upon the world, it affects our posterity, and they become cursed and enslaved to the worldly pursuits that we exemplify and perpetuate. So we need to be cautious. We need to be humble and turn to God. So ask yourself, is your heart as a father or mother turned to your children, or is it turned away, not realizing the effect that your choices have on possible circumstances of the future? Do you act as if it doesn't matter, that your days will be peaceful, your days will be fine, you will end your life in freedom with no thought of what will happen to your posterity, even though they are prophesied to be taken captive by the enemy? Or I should say, it's essentially a cause of the need for the priesthood to be returned through Elijah that we read about in Malachi. because those hearts are turned away from their children. And the restoration of the covenant is turning those hearts of the children back to the promises made to the fathers, and all coming back, converging on Jesus Christ, who is in the middle and at the forefront of all of that. So that does it for this week for chapters 38 and 39. I hope that all of us are gaining from these words and gaining from these experiences, turning our hearts to our fathers and seeing the good, seeing the bad, learning from the good, receiving the blessings, learning from the bad, avoiding the cursings, and redeeming the dead, redeeming them for their shortcomings by not making the same mistakes, by honoring them and turning to God in all things. So I pray that we may take the Holy Spirit as our guide continually, day in and day out, and may God bless you all.